Hey guys, what's going on? I'm Retro Bliss, and you are on the Retro Bliss Rewind podcast. Welcome to the show. If you're watching from Mike's Gaming Gala, it is being simulcast, is that a word? Simulcast over on his channel. Welcome to you guys as well. Tonight, we're going to have a fun episode, I think, because we're going to be talking about single board computers and how they can be used for retro gaming. And I am not an expert. And to be honest, our regular panel, they're not exactly experts either, but we know someone who is, and we have them as a guest. So I'm going to bring in our regular panel. First, Mike from Mike's Gaming Gala.
Hello.
Brian from BD Retro Mods, and then our special guest, Keo Dyken. Now that is fun to say, man. Keo Dyken. I love
what's
that.
going on, everyone?
Sounds like he's ready for a fight.
I know, right? He could be a Retro Bliss ninja, man. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I want to tell a story of how I got to meet or know Keo, as I affectionately call him. I was at Micro Center probably 2.5 years ago, maybe a little longer than that, and they had an Atari dual fight stick with trackball on sale. It didn't come with anything. It was just considered a controller, right? So, but I had looked into it prior, and I knew that I would have to buy what's called a Raspberry Pi, which is a single board computer, if I wanted to play it the way I wanted to play it. But I really didn't need to do that. I could have easily plugged it into a PC or to a PS3 or something, because it's compatible with those things. But anyway, so I started looking into it, and I could not get any of the images that I had found to be configured with the controller, with the dual fight stick. And so I started looking around, and I somehow stumbled across Keo's YouTube page, and he had developed an image specifically for the dual fight stick, and he was sharing it with everybody, and so I got the link, downloaded it. Man, it worked like a charm, and the rest was history. I had some questions here and there that I would contact him, and he just was so nice and kind to share. And as I got to know him, I didn't realize how much of an expert that he was with single board computers. So what I would like to ask you, Keo, because there are a lot of people that want to know, what are single board computers?
So pretty much a single board computer is a computer that's on a board that has pretty much everything you need to run it. So they differ from a mini PC because you have access to GPIO pins. Everything that you pretty much need to run a computer is on the board itself. When you buy a regular size computer, you have to buy a video card, you have to buy a hard drive, you have to buy, all the additional peripherals really to make it work. But with these, they're small, they're compact, they're made to travel with. And so what these things do is just give you everything that you essentially need to run the board itself without having to need additional equipment.
Yeah. Now, I didn't really look into the history of it, but my recollection is that the Raspberry Pi Zero was kind of the thing that started it all, and it was something that was kind of developed over in Great Britain. Am I correct?
Yeah, it was a little bit before my time. I think it was the Raspberry Pi Zero that I'm not even sure if that's where single board computers really started. I know that was what Raspberry Pi kind of started off with when they first.
Yeah, it made them popular.
Oh, definitely. And so I think it was probably the Pi 1, maybe the Pi 2 is when it really got popular for retro gaming. And so, these are just nice form factor devices. You pay roughly the initial thought was you pay anywhere between $10 to $35 to have some very simple solutions. Obviously, we know they've gone up in price since then, but that's pretty much the general idea, was to kind of, originally like Raspberry Pi marketed as the replacement to the computer, so to speak, and use it as a hobbyist tool. So,
and those run operating systems pretty much. I think the operating system of choice that I'm aware of is Linux. but it might be compatible with other operating systems. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I wouldn't see why not.
Yeah, so you have Android. So most ARM-based single board computers, like your Raspberry Pi 5, your Orange Pi 5 here, and obviously the other variants of that type, you typically have two variant chipsets. You have ARM and you have x86. ARM is what you would typically find like in your Android devices, like your Apple, some of the Samsung devices. Those are made for high usage but low battery power usage, low battery power consumption. And then of course you have your regular desktop PCs, and you also have your x86 variant, which are made to be a little bit more robust, where they are power hungry, but they definitely do the job. And so we're using computers right now. Those are all x86 based build. Most applications, or pretty much the majority of applications, will work for this type of architecture.
Yeah, I actually there are, like I said, I got a Raspberry Pi and got a case with it, and I was fortunate enough to get your image and put it on there. And of course, I had to add my own games, but that was fairly easy to do. But if you have a Windows PC, you basically have to do it over a network.
Right.
At least that's the way that I've known to do it. But as I was after I had done that, of course, I'm a YouTube guy. I like researching and doing and seeing things on YouTube about things that I'm interested in. One of which was the Raspberry Pi 4B, which is what I had bought for my fight stick.
Hmm.
And so I wanted a way that I could play games portably, and I found this, and I've had this for a while. It's called the Pi Boy DMG, and I know you've seen these.
Oh yeah,
And
I got one of
there
those. Yeah.
is actually a Raspberry Pi in there. See all the USB slots
Yeah.
and the network slot and everything. Um,
Uh huh.
yeah, and when you turn it, it's got RetroPie on it, and you can add as many games as you want to it, and it will play. And it has a 4B Raspberry Pi 4B in there as well. So whatever would play well um, on a
On a
4B
4B.
would be great for it. And I've actually used it for that. So
Hmm.
they're very versatile. But one thing that intrigues me about you is your knowledge with these things, and what you do. It's like when these things first come out, it's almost like you're chomping at the bit to figure out how to get them to do what you want them to do.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, when I first found out about Raspberry Pi and RetroPie, I always had ROMs. I was familiar with emulation and how games were supposed to work, but it was at Arcade Expo 4.0, the Museum of Pinball. Now it's shut down. That was in 2018, March of 2018, and a guy was trying to sell me one for $300, and I was like, "Hey, man, this thing is really cool. You mind if I show it off on my channel and stuff?" I had no idea how popular they were. I had no idea about people trying to resell people's images and stuff like that. I just thought it was cool because I had a game room and I was looking for a very low cost solution. I didn't want to go out and buy a bunch of Dell PCs that's going to raise my electric bill. And all I want to do is use it to browse the web and play some retro games on there. That was pretty much my whole concept. So I saw the artwork on it. I saw how RetroPie had everything perfectly managed. It told you if the game was 2 players, 4 players, had all the artwork, everything laid out. It had the bezels, everything was pretty much there. I love the interface, and so I ordered one on Amazon. Got one a few months later, and just started tinkering around with it. I started building it myself. I didn't use any images. Started trying to work on it, and come to find out, that's actually how I met the Supreme team. Some of the developers was like, gee, like this ought to be like the official image or OS of the Raspberry Pi for RetroPie, because I saw all the scripts, I saw how much work actually went into it versus trying to build it myself. I was like, this looks more like a PC gaming front end. Like if something I wanted to
Mm.
compare like Windows to have RetroPie, some of the settings and scripts, they had everything added. And then come to find out, some of the first images that I use on the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus were Supreme. I found that out a few months ago. Like a lot of them were people just took their work, loaded them up as images, and it worked perfectly. So I had a ton of problems when I got into RetroPie and retro gaming on these single board computers. Some images wouldn't work. Some of them had the wrong file sizes. People didn't know how to properly shrink it. I mean, it was a ton of problems, especially going from the 3B to the 3B plus, and there weren't a lot of images readily made for it. So I don't dread that on anybody. But that's how I found out about RetroPie. I fell in love with it. I spent hours tinkering around with it, and I just thought it was the coolest thing to have a credit card sized device be able to run Atari, Amiga, Daphne, Maine, like all the old arcade games. And so at the time it was $35. You really couldn't beat it. I mean, it was just low cost, simple solution. And I think that's what everybody got addicted to, was the $35 or $30 low cost solution. Everything from Atari all the way up to like PlayStation 1, possibly a little bit of N64, and you couldn't go wrong with it. So
and that
Go ahead, Mike.
was their origin. They were originally designed specifically to be like a worldwide accessible PC. You don't have to have lots of money, but you could have a computer.
I think it was to help for like teaching people how to program and things like that. That's
exactly.
why it was. It just this piece to it just kind of came after the fact, because
somebody saw it and was like, "Hey, I know what I could do with that."
Well, because us retro gamers, we need the penny pinch whenever we can, right? So,
especially when you're retired like I am.
And even again, you are not allowed on this show ever to complain about not having a budget, because your budget last year was like 3 times mine. but my only real experience, it might have been a Pi 1 or it might have been a Pi 2, but like when they first kind of became available, I did pick one up. I 3D printed a little NES shell for it, and I tried to set it all up on my own. And I didn't even find any YouTube videos on it. I found like on a forum somebody had typed up how to do it, and it was a complete pain in the butt for me. I did get it running. I didn't do any tweaking on it, so even Super Nintendo, some games didn't run very well. But so all this and basically everything that happened after that, this is all really cool to me.
No, for sure, because to Mike's point, I mean, because like you said, the 3B Plus was the first one I got, because like you said, it was the $35, why not try it? And I will say, for the RetroPie, setup, that they were really, like, they had really good documentation at that time, and I'm sure they still have it. And to Mike's point, like, I did all that myself too. Like, like I know Phil said with the dual arcade thing, because I had an X arcade stick at the time, and before I started making my own, and I had to set it up to make everything, because it was seeing it like a keyboard, so I had to map everything within the settings of the RetroPie to make that all work in the background, and I eventually learned how to grab the images and the information from it, things like that. But I never got it to look as pretty as I'm sure your image setup is, and like others where you had the bezels and all that other stuff. I mean, it had the image of the game, and it had a little brief description and the information, but that's about all the farther I got, because the other side to it was, I think I only had a 64 gig micro SD in it, so obviously didn't want to take up a lot of space,
of course,
for the bezels and stuff too. So, but again, it was great. I mean, if again, they're not, and that's where you'll be able to probably tell us more later in the show, like what is the best approach today, which for this. But back then, how could you argue $35 for a device that would let you literally, like you said, do everything up to the PS1? And my main reason for it wasn't necessarily the console games, more of the arcade games. So the fact that you had so much main compatibility, with it through the RetroPie, that, I mean, it was just great. It was just a cool little device. Now, personally, and I don't know how others are, is just my issue with these things is just it's not that I don't like them because they're cool. I mean, it's a great way to preserve, retro gaming history and enjoy it. But
Yeah.
the issue I run into is you put so many damn games on it. I waste more time cycling through the menus to decide what I'm going to play than
That's why
actually
you
play a
said
game.
favorites.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to respond to this comment. No, Derek.
No.
No.
Agreed. Nope.
Uh-oh.
So, hey,
guess-
Keo, I know you wanted to reply to that, but when you do that, I want you to explain, because Brian was alluding to this, and so was Mike. What is an image? Like, I know what it is. These guys know what they are. But if for those of you who may not know, what is an image, and how does it relate to a single board computer?
So an image is a virtual copy of what you made. It's just a backup. It's basically the identical copy. It's just like copying and pasting. It's essentially what it is. Like if you were to back up a DVD player, or your DVD, music from a CD, make copies of files that you already have. That's essentially what you're doing. That's all an image is. It's just a virtual copy of what you created. So that's the sum of it.
Right, but as far as it's related to the Raspberry Pi or these single board computers, a lot of times it includes whatever operating system is running the software that will play your games, like RetroPie or Batacera, and
It's
those
Linux
kind of
based,
things.
right?
So the OS itself is, again, it just depends on what you're using. Like this board right here, this is the Ratsa X4. This is x86. This can run Windows, or it can run. This is the same type of chip that you guys would find in your mini PCs. It's x86 based Intel chip. Obviously, you can load Windows on here, Ubuntu, or even Debian. So you can run Linux on an x86 based board. On a Raspberry Pi, for example, or Orange Pi 5, they're ARM-based chips, so you can run Android on this. I think they have Windows ARM, but that isn't fully compatible.
Yeah.
But of course, you have
Windows
Debian.
ARM's a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah, you have Debian. You have anything that's Linux-based or Android-based, you can run it on here as well. Now, the common misconception is, you guys get a little bit of history. RetroPie itself, Batacera, Recall Box, those are all kind of the same branches. They're retro gaming front ends. Neither one of those front ends have never played any video games. We typically use that from a generic standpoint of just communicating. You have the OS like Debian or so forth, and then of course on top of it you have emulation station. For example, RetroPie uses emulation station. Batacera and Recall Box, they use their own separate version, customized version of emulation station. On top of that, you also have emulators. So you still have the necessary emulators running these games. RetroPie itself is just a housing for the emulators, the additional programs that run. So technically, RetroPie does not play any video games. Batacera does not play any video games. It's still the work of the other programs, emulators, RetroArch, whatever, like Kodi. Kodi's still doing that. That's not RetroPie. That's a separate program. If you have Plex on there, that's his own separate program. So all those front ends are just actual housings to make this other stuff really work.
Yeah, just to make an easier GUI experience instead of going to each application individually, trying to then pick your games.
Yeah. It's just it blocks out the desktop. The desktop is still kind of running there, but it just creates that GUI to make it look more attractive and appealing just for your games. That's really all it is.
Now with Batacera though, because again, I'm like I said, I was big on the RetroPie thing, when the Pi 3 was out for $35, but I've not done much of it here probably in the last 5 years or so. So like Batacera, like I know what it is, but now is that Windows only? I mean, does that have to be, or can that run on like a Raspberry Pi?
So Batacera works on, they have their own custom OS that works on the Raspberry Pi, whatever other single board computers they have out there. They make stuff specifically for ARM. And they also have, it runs on x86. They don't use Windows. So Windows would then be, here, let me close this so you guys can see it better. Yeah, and Batacera is its own OS. It doesn't run on Windows. That's why you have to. I think there's something in the BIOS you have to disable on your PC in order for it to run. So it's not
Okay.
using the Windows-based OS. It's using their own custom OS, but it's feeding off of the x86 architecture.
Okay. So someone who's running it on a PC or is ultimately dual booting or something like
Basically, yeah,
Yeah.
it's using its
Okay.
own, custom OS. Now,
Yep.
you could use like RetroBat, which will look kind of similar to that. I'm not sure if Recalbox runs on PC, but I know like RetroBat would look very similar to that, but that would run on the Windows OS, like Hyperspin, CoinOps, and some of the other ones. So just pick your poison, which one you really prefer at that point.
Well, I know Batacera has kind of become the more popular because obviously before it was RetroPie emulation station stuff, but I know Batacera has kind of become the new kid in town, the new popular one, and I was just curious there because I know a lot of people seem to run those on PCs, but that makes sense if you got to dual boot it. So
Oh, definitely, yeah.
I have a question. It's kind of varying. So you've got a variety of single board computers there.
Yeah.
And I know we've already talked about like when these first were kind of coming out, you could get a Raspberry Pi for $35. Would you
Right.
mind running through like just the ones that you have there, approximate prices of what those would run you now?
So obviously the whole idea was to get a Raspberry Pi $35 for emulation.
Mhm.
Everything
Yeah.
from your Ataris or whatever all the way up to like PS1. Raspberry Pi 4 came out. And the whole idea was to, okay, hopefully this runs N64 and several other systems on it as well. It still wasn't quite there because the Raspberry Pi 4 lacked a lot of GPU power.
Mhm.
Price went up $55, and then now we have the Raspberry Pi 5s. And so now we have, I can't believe the sun's really bright. We have the Raspberry Pi 5, and we have a phenomenal price here. Actually, it increased dramatically up to about $90, $80 or so, $70, up to about $120 for the 16 gigabyte model. And so
Wow.
the Pi actually lost a lot of market share,
Mhm.
especially with the retro gaming scene, because you had COVID, they had a lot of devices that weren't available, so people started to go the mini PC route. And so people say, oh, well, with this I don't have to configure anything, there's already images that can kind of work for it, and it just works right out of the box. You don't have to do any tinkering because there's only several developers that can actually know how to get RetroPie to work and actually get it to do the things that you need to do. So
And what you just showed us there, the Raspberry, is that actually two of them stacked?
yeah, the one on the bottom here
Okay.
is the Pi 4. This one here, the Pi
Okay.
4 8 gigabyte model. The one here on the top is the Raspberry Pi 5 8 gigabyte model. I
Gotcha.
just have them stacked there. So some time ago, just to kind of speed things up, I started to try to figure out where was the bottleneck, because it didn't seem as though if we got a stronger ARM-based CPU, we still had problems running N64,
Mhm.
some of the other systems without a lot of tinkering. And I tried to figure out exactly where was the bottleneck. Now, at the time that the Raspberry Pi 4 was out, Pi 3, these type of single board computers, these are called x86 based single board computers. They cost anywhere between $600 to $700. They weren't
Oh.
even reasonable.
That's a jump.
Right. So when the Pi 3 was out, Pi 4s, these weren't even reasonable to purchase, so people just kind of left them alone. And so when I started digging, I found out that the biggest bottleneck had to do with the architecture of the chips. Both of these same chips process information differently. This one is $80. It costs a lot less than the Raspberry Pi 5. Some bench tests will show that our Pi 5 in a bench test can outperform some of these other single board computers. So for example, we have here the Ratsa X2L is also the same Palm Shell, this unit here. On Geekbench, it'll give you an average score of 379. Whereas the Raspberry Pi 4, Pi 5 will give you, or at least the Pi 5 will give you an average bench score of like 800, maybe 900. However, because this one's x86, this one in terms of emulation can kick the crap out of this one.
Huh.
Well,
So that
again,
bench score isn't really the end all.
well,
No, well, Yeah,
Okay.
no bench test is the end all be all. That's why my new
Mhm.
thing is, maybe you guys have seen comments, Retro Blizz, I'm so you've seen it. There's been a lot of questionable reviews where someone would say this one's good because it has an 800 score. This one's good because it has a 900. This one's good because it has 700. But these two boards here, this Ratsa X2L, actually this one's the X4L, but the X2L and the UY2X1, both of these are x86 PCs. They use like Celeron based
Mhm.
Intel chips. Would outperform a Raspberry Pi 4 or Raspberry Pi 5, but a board like this on a Geekbench score, for example, will only yield a number of about 470. So you would look at this number and say, "Oh, stay away from that one. Let me go ahead and get this one here, or let me get this one here because this is the RK3588, the Geekbench score, and other bench tests will yield different results." But they forgot to look at the architecture of the chip. And so I can run PlayStation 2 and other games full speed without any tweaks or optimizations, where this will still struggle.
Mhm. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and to your point, I mean, because I deal with at work Chromebooks a lot, and it's the same thing where an ARM-based Chromebook is not going to perform as well as an Intel-based Chromebook.
Yeah.
And again, it's
Right.
just because of the Intel architecture, well, the x86 architecture, just it handles the stuff better. And again, to your point, the specs don't always mean like, because yeah, I mean, I see those scores on other things too, and it's just like, well, that's not in a
Is
real
that a real
world
life?
setting. Yeah,
Yeah,
in a
real
real life
world,
setting,
real
it's
use
not
case scenario, right?
correct. So I mean, I'm not surprised on that at all. I mean, the whole thing about ARM, at least for the longest time, it was cheaper. So again, you
Right.
got a good experience for less. But
Mhm.
when ARM devices start to become as expensive or
Right.
more expensive than the x86 counterparts, because like when you told me how much the Pi 5 costs now, because like I said, I just have not really focused on that scene lately. And it's just, yeah, why would I buy a Pi at this point? Like, I would be better off to buy a mini PC or something like that. Because, like, when you start talking that price range, you're not that far away from a mini PC.
Nope.
And you're
Yeah.
going to get a lot more compatibility at that point. Because, like you said, the Pi
And
struggles. Anything above PS1, it still has issues. And I've seen people run PS2 stuff on the pot, like stuff. But I mean, they had to do a lot of configuring to try to make it work, and it's still not perfect.
Yeah, definitely.
and how,
I've personally gotten up to over 800 games working on the Raspberry Pi 5, and even out of these two single board computers, the issue it comes down is to development. This is the RK3588. This is the Orange Pi 5. This is the Rock 5C. Both of them. This one uses a different variant of the RK3588. It performs, but it doesn't have a lot of development. And so a lot of times too, what you see is from the community, people like myself and other developers, it takes a lot of time to get us to get to where this point is. We spend a lot of time
Mhm.
testing and developing just for it to boot. So with this, we could actually spend more time getting it to do what it needs to do versus,
yeah,
oh, does this work or does that work? Like, for
just getting
example,
it to function.
right, just getting it to function. And so that's, there's a lot of misconceptions here, like, because a lot of times people will think that RetroPie is just, oh, anybody could go download it. Like, no, somebody had to get it to work.
Mhm.
Like, for example, there are still drivers that are not compatible with the RK3588 to make the USB ports do what they need to do. In some cases, the USB ports that look USB 3.0 can detect, due to a lack of development, as USB 2.0 or USB 3.0. So people have this conception that, yeah, I'm gonna go out and buy a mini PC or a single board computer, thinking that it's a Windows based, PC based experience where you just plug something in and it works. And that's not the case. We have to find the drivers to make sure we can make the Ethernet work, make the USB ports work, make the controllers work. So there's a level of process there. But again, the biggest game changer was the fact that these Intel based chips, like in the mini PCs, this one here, they dropped in price like over 70%, because something like this would have cost you about $600, $700 a few years ago.
And sorry, because we kind of moved off of it. What would something like that cost now, or like the X2L?
This one here, the X2L, is about $70.
Okay.
This and then this is the UE2 X1, another one of my favorites. This one has everything on it. I don't even know why it doesn't get the attention that it doesn't get, but it needs to have more attention. I mean, it has
No,
everything.
it doesn't, because that keeps it cheap. So everyone watching right now, go
Yes,
get one.
keep it to yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's nicely packaged, as you could see. This is the
Oh.
UE2 X1. You have all of your UART ports. You have 4 USB ports on here, Ethernet. You have your HDMI standard. You got a barrel jack connector. This is the first and only single board computer that I could tell that's properly priced. Typically about $104 starting off. And it has 2 microphones built in. Where have you actually seen a single board computer that has 2 quality microphones built in? One's digital, the other one's analog.
Well, and
Of course, I gotta ask, though,
leads
why?
to cannibal.
Why?
That leads to wait. That leads to Cannabis Kid's question here: is it possible to add text to speech? So maybe there is if you got a mic.
Yeah,
Just
probably
need the
so.
software.
I mean, yeah, we just never really experimented with it. And then, of course, too, a board like this, if you notice, it has the M.2 slot. Whereas you're paying approximately the same price for a Raspberry Pi 5, and then everything that I just showed you, most of this, like an M.2 slot and everything else, you still have to pay more money on top of that just to get it to do this. This has M.2 UART, comes with the fan. You have to buy a fan for the Pi 5 at $80 or $120. No M.2. You got to buy the heatsink for it. This already came with the heatsink. So they really outpriced themselves in terms of where you should be in. And I don't have to do much optimization on here just for gaming, but they've kind of outpriced themselves. I mean, look at this USB card reader, mini HDMI out. There's a ton of things on here. So I had to have this. When the company sent this over for review, I actually almost begged them to send, because I knew what I could do with this. So,
Well, and the other thing too to keep in mind, like, I really like the fact that there's an M.2 port on that one, because again, like, and you kind of alluded to it, was with the Pi. Like, I think at this point in the life of the Pi, like, the idea of just using a micro SD card and have everything on that, it's not realistic. Like, if you want all the nice bells and whistles of the GUI and the bezels and all that stuff, you're likely going to spend additional money on an external hard drive for it.
yeah.
And so, obviously, one of the appeals of these is that it's nice and slim and compact. Now, if you got
Yes.
this little compact device plugged into an external USB that might need some extra power to it because it's not getting enough off the, and I'm not saying that's the case with this, but sometimes when you plug in those external hard drives, it needs additional power that you might not get off of depending on the size. And where, get a little, because M.2 drives are not overly expensive anymore. So you can put that in there and definitely house all your stuff there and still have that nice compact device.
Yeah, I think what it came down to was price as to what am I getting for my money.
Right.
If Raspberry Pi 5s still came out at $35, $40, I don't think it would be an issue.
Oh, no
I think
doubt.
what people,
Yeah.
I think where people started to feel insulted was, okay, you have these other devices that's offering all of this for $105 that has everything, the fan and the heatsink and all these additional connections, but you cost more than what these other competitors are really offering. And so I think that was really the drawing point, just like with retro gaming and using mini PCs, was that, well, I don't have to tinker. You have all these other x86 based programs that automatically work for it. We love your Raspberry Pi, but you still require a certain amount of work. And that's the other drawback of this, is that a lot of these single board computers, especially the ARM based ones, even if a company sends them to me for review, and I'm greatly appreciative of that, we spend more time developing and fixing and adjusting and making it work than there is in the actual value of the board itself. Because I could spend 2 or 3 years on this, but a company sends me something for $60. I mean, I'm spending 2 or 3 years on this, and all they did was send over something that's valued at, $60, $100. I mean, I paid for this, but I'm just using this as an,
Right.
as an
Yes.
example. There's a lot, people don't see the development time. And so sometimes when I see other reviewers talking about these, we look at it from a performance standpoint, but I'm looking at it, well, how much time and money did it cost me to get it to that point? Whereas maybe this or this was probably ready to go right out of the box.
Yeah, Bigfoot.
So-
The VCS it is. It's a single board computer.
So I while I'm sitting here listening,
Can I before, because pose
go
another
ahead.
question here. If you were to suggest something to somebody who is just going to grab an image and put it on something that somebody else has spent years developing, if you were to recommend one of these guys here, which would you recommend? Pose asking.
Oh, that's a tough question. So I had a customer, or not a customer, I had a friend of mine, he asked me that exact same question. So here's the problem. There are two that I would really recommend to anybody. The other issue is this was actually a business. This guy, I know he runs a business. He does AV installation. And he asked me which one of these boards are the best. And it took me like 10 minutes to answer his question. Because the other part of it is logistics. Logistics. I would recommend the UE2 X1 for the price and everything that you get for it. If you want something that's kind of like this, same type of x86 build for gaming, I would go with this. The only problem is, let's say you're a business customer and you need 1,000 units, I may have to recommend the Raspberry Pi, because you could go get them anywhere. Go get them at Best Buy, Micro Center. They have a very good logistics layout, whereas some of these other ones you have to order directly from China.
Right.
So in the case of Poe, he'd probably want the UE2 because he just needs one. Casey, since he's going to want at least 500 Raspberry Pi. That's the answer.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I like this one too, because again, you have to order it from overseas, but it's nicely packaged. This looks like something you would buy right off of a store shelf. I mean, it's not like wrapped in plastic or anything. This looks like an official store-bought product. If I had to go with one unit, it just set up without needing or relying on other developers in the community to do something for me, I'd probably go with this one. I'd more or less likely I would go with that.
Okay, this is my question, and I know what to do when I'm looking for a Raspberry Pi image. Where are the best places to get these images, and which does, what makes one image better than the other?
Ooh, that's a tough one, because the only people that actually know what the images can do are the people who actually made it.
Right.
Well, I'll give you an example. Like when I was looking for some images, because I took a Raspberry Pi and I took an arcade one-up machine, and I took the PCB off the back,
Right.
or whatever it is, and hooked a Raspberry Pi up, and then basically plug the monitor in and set up a button configuration. And I had basically a RetroPie stand-up machine. And so, but when I was looking for an image, I started looking around and I found a place called Arcade Punks.
Right.
So arcadepunks, I think .com is what I think it is. I'm not 100% sure about that. And they have different images there. They have RetroPie images. They have Batocera images. They have images for 32 gig, 16 gig micro SD cards, and then they have some for terabyte micro SD cards. It just depends on what you want. But that was a place I stumbled upon just doing a search. But I'm not privy to if where the best places are to look. Now, if I have a really tough question, I always I got you on speed dial, Keo, but not everybody does, right? So I was just wondering about that.
So a lot of image makers and developers have kind of disappeared from the scene, and they started to create their own Discords. Like me now, I have my own Patreon following. There's also another website called backups.me. You typically need a membership to get that one. So the community is not like it where it used to be, where there was that one stop website to go to download the favorite images and stuff. So typically you would find your favorite image maker developers who's really working on a project and then kind of follow them. That's now typically the trend. So like if you like my stuff, you follow me, Facebook groups, whatever the case might be. And then if you find somebody else, a lot of the other guys have their own Discords and so forth, or Patreons and other group affiliations.
Well, and I think a lot of that too, and like from what I've just kind of seen in social media stuff, is that it seems like a lot of people also charge now for it. Like
Right,
before,
right.
I think there was like that whole little competition of who can make the coolest GUI, interface for this stuff. So people would throw their stuff out or share it, and people would build off of it or whatever. But I think it's just now it's become more of a, hey, I put all this time and effort into it.
Right.
I want some compensation for it now. And I think that's also why, to your point, because I know, because I think Casey mentioned, I know there's one person who really pushes a product that they use with the Pi. And
Right.
and again, I have no idea what they charge for theirs, but but now also I know that particular Pi also includes all the games and everything else with it. So which, full disclosure, as we're talking, that's technically not legal. But
Oh, of course.
but again, I know, to your point though, I think that's why we kind of see it the way it is now, because of certain legalities, and and also understandably wanting to make some, profit off their time. So
Yeah. So yeah.
Brian, you might be able, before you go into that, you might be able to answer this. I believe the VCS 800 is an SBC, right?
it is a
SBC.
single board chip, and or computer. I'm sorry, single board computer. Same with technically like your 2600 plus, your 7800 plus. They're all single board computers too, that are just literally designed to just run the 2600 and 7800 emulators. So
Right.
You guys were talking about pirating images, and Derek says Nintendo has entered the chat.
yeah.
And the other important thing too is about these single board computers and these images. Do you know it's not the usually obviously when you sell something, you look for like what is the key point of buying it. Do you know is not the ROMs anymore? Who cares about the ROMs? You can go get ROMs anywhere. What you're looking for is the development and the optimization
Right.
that makes it work. Like for example, you don't see too many Pi images for the Pi 5. We're the ones, the Supreme Team is the one that released it and stuff. So you have ROMs. I'm sure you guys have all the Atari ROMs and whatever. You're not downloading an
Only
image
of the games we own.
Yeah, of course, yeah. Only, yeah, you're not going after the ROMs. You're looking for the configurations, the automatic plug and play. Oh, the send in light gun automatically works. I don't have to configure it. That's the one that I want. Oh, this is already working. Like what RetroBlitz said about my image. It wasn't he needed the games itself. He wanted the configuration, the sensitivity of how I already had it set. It was working. That's what people are really banking on. And so that's, private ownership. But, like myself, I was doing a lot of stuff. I wouldn't call it for free, because when I went, and I've probably told this story before, when the Raspberry Pi 4 first came out, I went and bought several of them. And this was back in 2019. I sat in traffic for 6 hours. It took me 3 hours to get there, 3 hours to get back home. And that's not free. I didn't have a Patreon at that time. I was kind of making YouTube videos and stuff. So you have a lot of developers and people who you don't see up front. They are spending their own time and money
Right.
getting this to actually work. What really started to bother people is that the people who spend time actually getting it to work would then download it, just upload some stuff to it, and really kind of rename it or calling it their own. So
Yep. And like I said, I have no issues at all with it, because again, you're putting in that time and effort. I mean, I see nothing wrong with being, compensated for it. And now obviously the issue comes down to is when you start, and I know your images don't have that, is obviously when you start
when you add the ROMs.
when you add all the ROMs in with it and everything else. But again, we're not the that's a whole nother topic in itself. But
We're not the police here.
Right, we're not the police, but again, you put that, and again, long time ago doing it, but I know how long it took me to set up my RetroPie,
Right.
to get it how I needed to get it. It took hours of work, and then also to get all the interface the way you wanted it and stuff. And even at the end of the day, I still wasn't fully happy with it after putting a few hours. I got to a point where I'm not putting any more time into this. I can see what the game is. I see a picture. I see some basic information. My controllers work on it. I'm done.
Mine ended up the same way.
Where, I mean, at the end of the day, if someone already has that all figured out and it's literally plug and play, it's definitely, plug and play. And maybe at worst case scenario, you load in the ROMs. I mean, it's well worth it. I mean, again, there's nothing wrong with being compensated for your time. So
Yeah, I want to show you guys
certain Mr. Poe style that all of these can play that.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I want to show you guys just a little bit of history here. This is the Samsung T7. I bought these initially when they first came out, and the Raspberry Pi 4 was first bootable for USB and SSD drives. So keep in mind, like myself, like typically people now will say, oh yeah, I'll just go download a RetroPie image and go get something to work, right? Like it's foolproof, like it's been tested, somebody's done it. I was the first one to do it. Like as soon as it became available, I had to go out, buy a Samsung T7 at $229 as a test, not for fun, not for like a lot of this stuff is purchased just for, proof of concept, just to see if it if it even works or not.
That's
And
why
so-
Micro Center, when they see you come and they roll out the red carpet. I've honestly thought for a time there that Kia was literally a spokesperson for Micro Center.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I wish. But yeah, these are just some of the things that we have to invest in just to test, not for fun, not enjoyment, not sitting around hours. Like this is just test. Like this one here was $300. This is the Samsung T9. I haven't even done anything with it yet. So we spend a lot of time in development, so you don't have to. Like different SD cards, I want you to have a nice working, smooth transition, so we know what works, what doesn't work. But I mean, if I had a bunch of sponsors, it would probably be different. But we have to go out, at least myself, buy it, test it, use it, report results. This works, this doesn't work. These are the issues we had with it. Versus several months later, someone says, oh, I could buy this. It's already been tested. It's already been done. Somebody, and because all of this is hobby related, it's not a product. Somebody has to make full proof of it, like proof of concept.
So that leads me to my question that I've written down. I've been staring at for the last little bit here.
Yeah,
you have
sorry.
mentioned a couple of times about the Supreme Team. And we
Yes.
know you're on the Supreme Team, but we do not know what that is. And I'm assuming that these are the guys who you and the rest of these guys are the ones who are doing all the hard work. So we don't have to. Am I correct?
Yeah, I'm actually not on the Supreme Team. I just work with them, test it, and we put out all this nice, cool stuff. So it's a group of guys. They're in the background. They put in a ton of work. Most of them aren't really on social media like YouTube and stuff, but testing, lots of testing. And when we're done testing, more testing again to make foolproof. And we've dispelled a lot of rumors. Like when I make videos, this is hours upon hours of information that we've compiled in order to give you guys the best and most accurate information. So just so you guys can see it here, some of the newer information, I've been kind of alluding to this, is that when we run these single board computers for the most part, and I feel sorry for a lot of the other reviewers that maybe have already put this information out, but 9 times out of 10, do you know you're not reviewing the single board computer? Most of the time, the results and the performance result you're getting is from a file, like which will be the OS or the kernel. So you can load one that's optimized, or you can load one that's unoptimized, get different varying results. And if you only run that one instance, you could make a company look good or make them look bad, or cause viewers like yourself to have a different misconception of a particular
Power.
product.
The
Like for
power.
example, Yeah, like for example, you guys haven't heard much about the Raspberry Pi 16 gigabyte model, have you? Well, I
No.
haven't I haven't uploaded the video. I got it in January because I was doing a ton of testing and got inundated. But we loaded a kernel. I did. If you watch the other channel, I have an affiliate channel called Arcade Media. We did a live stream. I did a live stream, and that particular file, the OS or the kernel, caused it to overheat.
Okay.
You have
The
not
new
heard.
one, it caused
Yeah.
the new one to overheat.
Right, but you haven't seen that anywhere because when people typically do a review, they download Debian, they download Unix or Linux, they download something somebody else made. They're not the ones adding drivers and different files to these single board computers. You can add just like there's certain kernel versions that will make it perform or make it not perform. And if you're not careful with how you advertise it or mention it, people can be turned off by a product simply because of a bad file. You didn't change the capacitor, you didn't add more memory, you didn't take it away. No, you just probably added a bad kernel to it that is giving it an adverse result. In fact, when I was using my 16 gigabyte Pi 5, it was overheating. The HDMI port got too hot to touch. It did perform. In fact, I didn't have to optimize Wii emulation on it as much. But guess what? We said, screw it. He said that's not going to work, and it was faulty. But that had nothing to do with the Pi itself. That had to do with the file that was causing it to react a certain way.
Well, we've talked for hours and hours on this podcast alone about emulation and the future of it. And there are a number of us that consider ourselves purists that we want to play on original hardware whenever possible. But as time goes on, these
becomes
consoles,
less and less realistic.
Yes,
Right.
and especially now that retro gaming, it's almost being an unreachable dream for a number of people because they cannot afford to collect anymore. It used to be you get these games on the cheap. You can't do it anymore. So emulation is the future for retro gaming. If you want a retro game, as time goes on, it gets more and more prevalent. And so I think that these single board computers are going to play a big part in that for a lot of people. A lot of people do emulate through regular PCs. Just with the standalone emulators within whatever operating system, whether it be Windows or whether it be Mac OS, whatever the case may be. But these single board computers, they're nice because it can be specific, especially with the images, just for that. That's all it does. If that's what you want it to do, it can do other things. But if that's what you bought it for, you can do it for that. I've done that. I've got let's see, 1, 2. I got 3 Raspberry Pi 4Bs right now that I do that something with them, and so I
go ahead.
I was just
gonna. Oh, go ahead, retro.
No, I was going to ask you if you had anything that you wanted to add to what I just said.
I think sometimes too we have to be realistic to just enjoy the pastime, because I love original hardware. However, I can tell you, even running a number of games emulation, it doesn't run the same way like the original game. For example, the
In a
Pi
lot of
4.
cases.
Yeah, like when I was running NFL Blitz on PlayStation 1 on my Raspberry Pi 4, Fantastic Four, which is one of my favorite games on the PlayStation 1. Do you know the Raspberry Pi 4 runs it much better? It runs it faster than it did on the PlayStation, on the authentic hardware. That load time, I kind of missed that. So even even if emulation's running it better, I think at some point we just have to accept the fact that was a moment in time, because it's going to run how that hardware designed it to run. There's no hiccups on it. I can tell it runs it faster because it doesn't have to load the disk and do all the load times. So if you're looking for that 100% authentic experience, you're only going to get that with that authentic original equipment.
And there are situations like with NES games, some that I've played in the past that you get to certain parts of them where it slows down because the hardware can't keep up. And then you play it in emulation and it doesn't slow down on that part, but it's ingrained in my head. It should be slowing down right now. And that's part of the gameplay. So definitely.
Well, and I think the other thing too is just, it's the same conversation we had when we talked about even like the Atari Plus units and stuff. It just, this is a much more, especially if you get an image that's ready to go, everything like that. It's a simpler way to play. And again, not everyone cares about having that authentic experience. Not everyone cares about having it, be quote unquote arcade perfect, because again, emulation is not perfect. And that's why you have FPGA stuff, that's a whole nother conversation in itself. But the thing is, it's a cheaper way to still enjoy those games. And I would also make the argument, if you want to go back and play arcade games, this is really your option to do that. Because again, like we talk about playing on original hardware, we're not going to have all these freaking arcade cabinets in our basement to go play the arcade games. So that's where this comes in handy. And, and even when I had my own RetroPie, I liked playing some of the console stuff. But again, I prefer playing it on original hardware with flash carts if it came down to it. But I use the RetroPie for arcade games because, again, I don't have an arcade cabinet in my basement and again, don't have room for it, even if I wanted one. and this is a way to experience all those games because there's so many arcade games that just did not come to home console. And or the ones we grew up with, like playing. I mean, now again, you can get them on like the Switch and things like that now. But like just playing the arcade games of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or The Simpsons. We never got The Simpsons, on home console. Or X-Men the arcade on home console. So I mean, Aliens versus Predator, Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. I'm just running off some of my favorite arcade games that I like playing on the RetroPie. So it's just. I mean, this is a way to do that. That's really the only way, in my opinion, you can experience all these arcade games because it's just not realistic to have all the cabinets at home to do it.
Yeah. And then
and
also
if you're having any trouble setting them up, we're going to put Kyle Dykin's phone number up on the screen in a minute.
I have a feeling you did that. It would get changed real quick.
Yes, it would.
Yeah, then too, you also have a lot of games that didn't provide the controllers and stuff. Know if you guys remember Centipede? It came out on the Xbox 360 marketplace many years ago. But do you know that even now I still can't get a trackball to work with that? So you still had a trackball. You would need a trackball controller to simulate the authentic arcade setting. You couldn't typically find a arcade stick that had a built-in trackball. That's one reason why I bought that Atari Micro Center controller. Because it had the built-in trackball.
And that was one reason why I needed your help was because I could not get that trackball configured with the images that I had. I just didn't know how to do it. And you're like, oh, I got that. I'll hook you up.
He's got a ball image for you. Oh,
yeah. I'm sure he does. But Poe was mentioning the iArcade. There's actually... Glenn, I can't remember what his full name is.
Talking about Glenn's retro show, Glenn.
Yeah. He has a Viper board. Now that's a single board computer, also, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's built on the same type of scale of like a Raspberry Pi 4. It's a single board computer. I have it in the garage actually. I could bring it in if you guys wanted to see it. It has the same type of form factor. He has some USB connections on there. HDMI port, I believe. I can't remember what port he's using on there. That one's using an Arcade 3566. So it's somewhere upon the same lines of like a Raspberry Pi 4. I think he's using, I can't think of the name of the OS that he's using on it. I know originally he was going to go with Batacera, but then he went with, I think it's called Arcade or something of that nature to give you that retro gaming experience. So, that's not like a universal product. He basically built his own single board computer using different components and so forth.
Yeah. I actually ordered one. I'm waiting for it. I'm anxiously awaiting to get that.
Oh, I thought you were on a super tight budget, Phil. Never able to buy
Phil.
anything.
Plastic is paying for some of this, but anyway. These guys, I'm retired and I tell them how I'm on a budget all the time, but I seem to always be able to get what I really want. So they're totally confused. So
Absolutely.
well, I think this has been an awesome show. I think it went really well. I've learned a lot.
Probably for me, one of the most informative shows we've had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I don't know, if if someone doesn't know anything about this, do your research, figure it out, get on Keo's YouTube page, check out all his videos.
I posted it here as a comment earlier, but I will, and I'm sure you will as well. We'll put his channel in the description.
Yeah. Well, no,
Yes.
I know if you got an image for that UE2, I'm half tempted to go buy one here tonight. So,
Well, and that's the cool thing about this one and the Rats X4. So if you have CoinOps, Hyperspan, or one of those other Windows-based front ends, they automatically work on it.
mm-hmm.
Yep. So yeah, I just like I said, I could, when I started looking into it and I saw that you could actually put them in something like this. This is the same exact size as a Game Boy. It's called a Pi Boy DMG, but it, the screen's bigger and it's color and it has more buttons, but it's basically they just fit it in there. And I'm like,
it's nice to take something like that on the go, but even the stuff that Keo was showing us here, like the actual Raspberry Pi units or the UE2 or whatever. If you travel a lot for work, you bring one of those, you plug it into the TV in your hotel room, and you're playing.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep. I did that with my my niece and my nephew for Christmas. I just got something I was familiar with was the 4B, the Pi 4B, and I put an image on there, and I actually gave them a Mayflash F300 controller, I think is what it was, and I haven't heard from him since. He's been too busy playing games since Christmas. So anyway, Keo, thank you so much for
no problem, anytime.
Yeah, you're a good friend of the channel and good friend to me. Appreciate all that you do for the retro community, and like I said, Micro Center needs to give you a discount
bonus.
Yeah, because he's always, and I don't think he's sponsored by them in any way, but he regularly advertises things when he sees them at their store. We have a Micro Center here in Cincinnati, and that's one of my favorite places to go here. It's there's I always said that men shop, they know exactly what they're going for when they go into a store, and they're in and out, and women like to window shop and look at this and look at that. Not at Micro Center, man. The men are just like the women. They don't know what they just keep.
There are
looking,
certain
right?
stores that men will want. I will always wander a Home Depot. I will always wander an electronics store, and I will always wander a video game store.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
yeah, and that's the cool thing about Micro Center too, is that I know they've kind of changed, but they had home arcade, the buttons, your PC, your components. There's not too many stores where you can walk in and buy stuff for your retro gaming, the actual arcade unit at the time, and buy your PC hardware parts and everything that you really need as a one-stop shop, even just to look at it.
And many of these single board computers you can buy right off the shelf as well. So it's just, if you know what you want, and they would probably have it. But there's always the Amazon route, right? So
no, I did do a quick search. I saw that Amazon does carry the UE2, and it doesn't look like it's really much different in price than AliExpress. Though AliExpress does have some coupons right now for certain dollar amounts that would make it cheaper. Just FYI, not that I looked or anything. So
excellent board. Hardly ever talked about. I fell in love with it. I had to have it when I first saw it. So
I'm tempted myself, and I really shouldn't.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just at the price point, and like I said, I know AliExpress has it, and I know there's coupon codes right now on AliExpress for it too. That's a real good price for the specs. And again, if you have an image that's available that's already fitted for that, I mean, I think that's definitely the way to go to get the most compatibility with the games you want to play on it. So,
All right. So with that, I think we're going to call it a night. I appreciate everybody watching. I appreciate Keo being on, and obviously Mike and Brian, as always. They are my rocks here at the Retro Bliss Rewind podcast. We have a bunch of fun talking about retro stuff here. It's just, I always learn something on almost every episode. There's always something that I did not know. Of course, I know that's hard to believe, but anyway. So with that, you guys, we're going to sign off. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on Retro Bliss Rewind.